Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
I'm a pretty big fan of today's holiday.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. National.
Wait. Let me guess.
Yeah, let's
guess.
Okay.
Do you think
Should we say it at the same time?
Does it happen to be when they take two things and they sandwich a thing in between them and it's round?
He knows.
With something in the middle? An
Oreo Day. It's Oreo.
You guys do. You guys looked it up.
You know why? Because we look up things that you care about, and we're like, wow, you love Oreos and days. So
I do.
We were prepared.
I do like Oreos. I pretty much, when there's a new one that's out there, I'm like the guy people tag in it. Like, hey, have you tried this one? I've created, that's my legacy.
That's a part of your identity.
I think about
now.
you when I try a new Oreo.
Yeah.
This has become Jess and I's new thing is to try to guess which thing you're going to, so we looked it up and we were prepared. And
yes, we were.
Yeah, it's Oreo Day.
Yeah. Originally, they were called Oreo biscuits. And then they changed their name.
What's the knockoff cookie that's like an Oreo? Has a...
I don't know, but I will tell you.
You can tell the difference.
One thing that nobody's ever really been able to replicate, like any generic, is the Oreo.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take
Hydrox, that's
get on that soapbox, Alex.
Yeah, like that is the one cookie for sure that no one's been able to. They've taken a lot of the Girl Scout cookies, and like Thin Mints, and they've taken like the Caramel Delight or whatever that's called. A lot of those, generic people have come out with, but Oreo.
Okay, I didn't want to misspeak, because I hate saying things wrong, but I'd heard this and I wanted to confirm, and this is actually true, that Hydrox was the original chocolate sandwich cookie launched in 1908 by Sunrise Biscuits.
All before 1912.
Wow.
And then 4 years later, Oreo debuted, and they just dominated the market after that. So it's interesting how that happens sometimes, where someone there's a product that hits the market, and then someone just does it way better, and they win.
Well, especially at that time.
Yeah.
1912.
Our producer, Bryce, is texting saying that he likes the Trader Joe's version of the Oreo.
He's welcome to like
one.
it, but it's not like...
That's another
it doesn't
contender.
mean it tastes like
it slaps, I think
Oreo.
is what he said.
Oh.
It's fire, sorry.
Have you had the Trader Joe's Oreos to compare?
I have not, but I guarantee you it does not taste
maybe
Oreo.
This is a challenge now.
I will
maybe
say
he wants you to...
That you bring up a good point, Bryce, because Trader Joe's does do the different flavors too. They did pumpkin, they did peppermint for Christmas, so they do kind of add a little flavor. Maybe we should do a blind taste test. It'd have to be totally blind because he would be able to see.
The Reese's peanut butter ones
we have
were
to feed
definitely
it to
my
him.
favorite.
That is what our listeners are hoping. We do more blind taste tests.
Next podcast is just a box with straws in it, and
all of those.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah, that's all we do now.
Do you have anything that you could do that with?
I thought I did.
Are you with the
and
diet?
I failed.
The diet drinks.
The team I work with here at the church heard me mouthing off about how I could pick Dasani water out of a lineup because I think it's gross. And they gave me all of those waters to try in a hidden fashion. And I failed pretty miserably. I didn't pick Dasani out, but I thought for sure I could. So there's my overconfident personality shining through there.
Other exciting thing is, and this is, I will take the blame for this. I'm the person that filters or receives the voicemails, and usually I leave them unread, but I must have tapped this one and marked it red in January, and we haven't played it.
Oh, we have a voicemail.
We have a voicemail
from January. Okay,
from January.
Well, let's take a listen.
It could be January centric. I honestly don't know. I don't listen to them beforehand. So here it is.
Hi, podcast people. I have a small child, and when you have a small child, you read a lot of books to them, and my child is really enjoying Sesame Street right now. You got to read Sesame Street with all. I was wondering, if you had to read a book to your kids with all the voices, what character from Sesame Street would you do the best? You probably want some spirit of VeggieTales. You can say what VeggieTales character you're best at. And will you do it right now on the show? Thanks. I'll hang up and listen.
You've got Alex like paid
I
this
did not.
listener to do this.
I did not.
There is some money going on under the table.
I was like thinking what the ask was going to be, what book would you read out loud just out loud to your kids?
Yeah,
Because I have got lots of those, but
that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
we're taking.
Alex though notoriously does this Elmo voice all the time around the office in the most awkward times. So I can only assume it's Elmo.
I can't believe this is coming out. Do you really want to do it? I think that you get to choose a few.
You know, what book would I read and what Sesame Street character would I be? You know, definitely Elmo. Like, yeah, that's it. So I'd be like, me Elmo. Elmo love Ross. I love you, Ross. Elmo love you. Tell your kids. So there it is. There's my Elmo voice. Play that for your children, or don't play it for your children and freak them out. It was funny because I when my son was a baby, we had a Elmo puppet, and so sometimes my siblings, as my nephews and nieces were growing up, they would call Elmo. So I would have the Elmo puppet and I'd do the Elmo voice and
you would personalize it.
Yeah,
to them?
yeah.
Okay.
So if
are you willing? Are you willing to continue doing that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll create a Cameo account,
unofficial Elmo,
unofficial Elmo, and I will. Yeah, I'll get the. I don't think we have that anymore, but you know, if people pay for it on Cameo, I could probably buy a cheap Elmo. So there it is.
I don't know if I would do any of the voices. I mean, I feel like the easy one is the count, probably.
Oh, yeah.
You know, one, but I don't.
What about the you know what you and I could
monster,
be? You know,
Burger
you and I could do.
Monster. I mean, going back
we could
to
do
Oreos.
the guys. We could do the guys that are like, yup. We got it.
Yeah,
You guys did it.
I think for a book though, if I could do the Grover voice, I would do it, but I can't. So I'm not going to embarrass myself here. But I loved the book when I was a kid. The monster at the end of this book, do you remember that? Do either of you? I read it to my kids.
I don't recall.
It's Grover telling you don't turn the page, don't turn the page. There's a monster at the end of this book, and then the big reveal is Grover at the end of the book.
Grover.
I remember that.
But all right, well,
good times.
we did it. Thanks, Elmo, for appearing on the podcast. Wow. He did it for free.
Yeah. Let me know if you got a kid's book you want Elmo to read.
Great.
We'll try to do that as our next episode after we do our taste test.
I'm really waiting for you
Elmo
to
voice the whole time.
Whip that out on a Sunday morning when you're preaching. Just do.
Have you
done Elmo voice?
Mark is he's the voice actor.
Oh, okay.
I don't
my
think I'm going to do an Elmo
I think we're
voice.
good.
Okay.
On a Sunday
just
morning.
pray about it.
Well, I know because a lot of because we used to have Milo, which is not me, obviously, that's Bryant, but he has a high-pitched voice as well, Puppet.
Yeah.
And I remember during COVID, we would get some complaints sometimes from some of our senior saints and others that his voice was just piercing.
Yeah.
And I think maybe if you're losing your hearing and maybe especially low tones, maybe the high tones are especially exaggerated. But so I that for that reason,
You won't do
to
it.
protect the ears of our
stay on
listeners.
everybody's good side.
That's good. That's good.
Wow.
All right. Well, today on this.
Hopefully that wasn't triggering.
No, happy Oreo Day. I mean, it was a little bit. We're going to be talking about therapy speak and kind of how it's overtaken a lot of the vernacular of people in the U.S. at least, if not across the whole world, and people have just kind of started to adopt it and probably in a lot of ways use it correctly, but maybe not apply it correctly to their lives, or at least use it in a way that's actually helping them. It's more of a, hey, this is just a tool for me to kind of avoid uncomfortable situations. So anyways, that's what we're talking about today. You know, is this healing to use therapy speak, or is it kind of hiding from actually fixing those problems in your life or addressing them straight on.
And luckily for us, every week sitting next to us
Oh,
is a
Such
therapist,
such a blessing.
a professional,
Such a
someone
privilege.
who indoctrinates people every day in such
Ouch.
speech, and we're excited to hear the real truth today. So hopefully none of it's triggering for you, Jess.
No, we're good. We're good. I do think that when we're talking about therapy speak, we're having the conversation around things and terms that people would hear if they attended a therapy session, like sat with a therapist, gained something from something like that, and then carried on into their personal lives. That's kind of like
yeah.
the avenue that we're going through with this of like,
Well, and I think it's just that therapy has become so platformed in a lot of ways that more and more people are seeking it out, and because of that, I think the words that are used in therapy that people are learning to help express their emotions are now just so normal and nomenclature to the people in day-to-day conversation that you start to wonder, like, are they losing their meaning, or are they buzzwords on TikTok that people will just say? Or I mean, I think we mentioned triggering earlier, so it's like,
yeah, I think that gets
word
used a lot.
Once that word, it gets used so much now that sometimes when I hear it, I'm almost like, oh,
Triggered?
I almost get triggered. Yeah, when I hear it, because I'm like, almost like secondhand embarrassment for that person, because I'm like, don't use that in this context. Like, it's getting overused, and I feel like it loses, like any word, it loses its impact and value as it just gets thrown around.
Well, and on top of that, I think the diagnosis or diagnoses that happen, like in conversation, people are like, oh, that's just my OCD, like just desiring to have something in order, is a difference from OCD, or, people undiagnosed with, they just can't focus or whatever. And it's ADHD and like all those kind of things. And so even some of those things, or he's a narcissist, she's a narcissist, and we use language that both are helping and have, been established in clinical diagnosis and language for, and then just kind of like, I didn't grow up and hear anybody ever tell me I triggered them, but it has probably been as mental health becomes probably easier, simpler to talk about, which there's some goods of that. I think we've made a lot of progress in the mental health space. I think these are some of the maybe cautions or the things that can pull it towards a negative if used in the wrong ways. And so I think that's part of the conversation.
And also psychology is one of the younger fields in, if we're looking at healthcare, back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of things didn't even have a name for a diagnosis. That's why a lot of, like, we grew up and going to see a therapist it was almost taboo. It was an uncomfortable thing. It was something that we hid. And so I think, with social media nowadays, and we just haven't had a lot of language for things that we've kind of wondered, like, I've lived my whole life like this, or this was happening back when my dad was doing this or my grandpa was doing this, and we want language for it, and we want to be able to know things and be known and understand. And I think a lot of that is we're trying to put language to it, but in the process, what damage are we doing? Like, are we being misinterpreted, or what is that doing to us as we put that into the rest of our lives and on people that maybe don't understand?
Yeah, I think sometimes too, at least from my novice perspective, it tends to be a language that people will rely on to just explain their struggles rather than confront them. And I'm not, I guess, suggesting that therapists aren't helping people confront them, but I think when people learn about these terms on social media and they kind of self-diagnose themselves or start using that language, it's either for them just to express their struggles they're having, or even maybe to diagnose someone else, but not actually to kind of understand what's wrong with them.
Yeah. Well, even like that word we talked about earlier, trigger or triggering, I think clinically it would talk to, the stimulus that activates a trauma response, like rooted in past harm. So it's a trauma response. Something has happened, and that word or environment triggers, trauma. But oftentimes how I hear it, in, just culture is, yeah, I'm uncomfortable right now. Like I'm triggered, I'm uncomfortable. And so I think that's where it can devalue, somebody that's actually having like a traumatic experience or being triggered. And that's a painful thing. And they, maybe other things happen as a result of that psychologically for a person, anxiety attack or panic attack and things like that. But when we're just like, I'm triggered right now. Like you said something mean or makes me uncomfortable. That's not quite the same thing. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the ways that plays out, I guess, culturally.
I would say too, like clinically, if we're talking about a trigger, it's an external stimulus. So it's like a sight, sound, smell, something that triggers something external that has happened to us. And so I think a lot of times one of the problems, and I think we do need to be cautious. I mean, even like me, therapist to like another therapist, I would caution somebody on, what information are you putting out there that someone is going to pick up and splice or pass to somebody else that maybe they're not going to watch your whole video and process out everything, but they hear what they need and they take what they're going to take on to the next thing. And so part of me, I try to be almost the devil's advocate when somebody uses like somebody says I'm triggered, or I think another term that a lot of people tend to use like as a way of maybe putting some distance is like I'm protecting my peace. Like there's this thing where, okay, are you saying a boundary? What are you trying to do with that? But I think we take a lot of things that we hear that even resonate with maybe language we've never had, vocabulary we've never had, and we try to understand it and maybe get understanding from that or give it to other people, but it's not always helpful.
Would you agree that understanding your triggers, wounds, trauma isn't the same thing as overcoming them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think
because I just feel like so many times, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm just thinking sometimes that's where most of this ends for people. Is it's like, well, now I understand it. Now I've made it part of my identity. Now I can express this to people. I can verbalize this, and that's kind of where it ends. It's not actually about them overcoming. Now that you've identified it, I would think the next step is overcoming it. But it seems like a lot of times, at least when I see people going through therapy, it kind of stops at the identification stage.
Yeah, and I think if you identify it, I think that's the first step. If we're getting deep into like trauma work with therapy, and a trigger is a trigger to a trauma in therapy, the first step is noticing that. So you can notice like, what does this bring up in me? How does this affect my life? But if all we do is notice it and we don't go back to the root of it and do the work, then it will continue to stay a trigger that makes us act and have a reaction. And so I would maybe challenge there that maybe you've done the first layer of work, but there's more to be done because I think that there is a space where people can have an external thing happen that would have triggered them in the past that now they're able to have not bother them. And so that deeper work is done, not just saying, oh yeah, I know what my trigger is. Like I can't be around this or that, or I can't be around loud noises. Like that's one part of it.
And I'm curious, Jess, like, because when it comes to emotions, these are God-given things that we experience: sadness and happiness, joy. We have the full gamut of emotions that we do experience as a part of our world. And so I think sometimes, like, especially with darker, negative emotions, we don't like to sit in those. Most people don't like to sit in those. But even Wendell was talking to our staff, the other day or last week as we had a worship night about the power, though, of darker emotions and how if we never sit in them, if we never feel them, we never experience them, then we're unable to maybe have some of the healing or the breakthrough that actually comes. So if we just avoid all of that, and I think sometimes maybe we put up those blockades or We use words like, I'm triggered, don't do this, all that kind of stuff. And it's a balance, but how do we figure out if we're just saying, I need to be emotionally safe, or I just want to emotionally feel at ease?
Yeah. I would say too, being emotionally at ease can look like emotional safety. So to me, being emotionally at ease is if we distract ourselves. So this is what this looks like a lot. I guess if it would be, I feel a certain way, pull out my phone, or I feel a certain way and I walk away. I can't finish the conversation. That seems like it's creating emotional safety for you because you're removing yourself from the situation, but it really is creating more emotional ease because you're separating yourself from it. Emotional safety is where you're in a space where you can feel freedom to be vulnerable. And that can look like with another person. That can look like sitting with those emotions that you're talking about, Alex, and not running away from them, or maybe noticing like, hey, this makes me feel upset. What do I need? Instead of distracting ourselves immediately with, we all have our own coping mechanisms that distract us. And so creating emotional safety is maybe sometimes sitting in that a little bit longer and saying, how do I feel? And that could be reaching out to somebody. That can look a lot different to different people. But
so when we talk about boundaries, which is a term I hear,
this is such a big one.
I hear it all the time. I hear people saying, well, I'm just, I'm setting a boundary with this person or this situation or this, whatever, this environment maybe. What does that really mean? And from a therapist's perspective versus avoidance, which sometimes to me, it can sound like that when people are just like, oh, well, they went past my boundary. We're done. I'm cutting them off. It's over. I'm not talking. They're not allowed in my space. They're not allowed to have, I'm not inviting them to the holiday dinner this year because I bound, my boundaries. So help us understand what is that really? And are people abusing that term?
I think I may be abusing, but maybe noticing that I need to make a change and I don't know how to do that. But I've heard the term boundary and I need to fix something in my life. So I, again, always play a little bit of devil's advocate when I'm sitting with people with this, because I can give a lot of grace to what you're going through. What does a boundary mean to you? But a boundary is a clearly communicated limit that protects yourself. Maybe that looks like leaving the room, maybe leaving a relationship. Sometimes that looks like not being in a relationship with somebody. But also I expand a little bit on what a boundary looks like. And I ask the question, if I'm going to be in relationship with this person or this thing, I've said this on the podcast before, but if I'm going to be in a relationship with this person or this thing, what do I need to be in relationship with them? So it's not what do I need to be away from them? Do I need to have separation? But if I want this person in my life, then what does that look like? And creating some safety in that. And I think, an alternative to that is avoiding. And I think that is sometimes also very safe. And sometimes we do need to avoid people. So it's not like we have to confront every difficult thing in our lives, but sometimes that looks like running in the different direction, or that can look like giving somebody the silent treatment. And that might not be the right thing at the right time, but I would argue to some degree that that's not necessarily setting a boundary, but avoiding, escaping.
Yeah. And you can create boundaries in relationships that don't force you to avoid someone altogether, right? And so you can say, hey, yes, because of past traumas or whatever, these environments trigger me, or when when it's just you and I having this conversation, or when the conversation is led like this way, you can set up healthy boundaries that still allow that relationship to grow and flourish and be fostered more and more without just completely saying, but I'm going to avoid you altogether. I'm going to avoid every situation together. And a lot of that obviously takes work. I think Dr. Henry Cloud is probably the person, because he wrote the book Boundaries. I remember I had to read it back at Grace, that really popularized, probably in normal everyday vernacular, this idea of setting boundaries and how do we do that, which again is good. but it can be overblown when used without, I don't think, the full understanding of what we're trying to do there.
Well, and how do you define it from like, because ultimately control comes down to you. I can't control Jess. I can't control Alex. I can control me. So when we're talking about boundaries, at a certain point, I can tell someone I have a boundary, but I can't control whether or not they're going to cross that line.
Yeah.
So what does that mean when they do cross the line? Is it more about how I react to that line crossing happening, or is it more about them disrespecting my boundary, which I feel like as a person, I can choose to get irrational, upset, angry, mad because someone doesn't respect a boundary I set. But really, that probably says more about me than them in the fact that I'm not able to control my emotions when my boundaries aren't met.
Maybe, but to me, I would say if your boundary isn't met, that is all your red flags going off and you're very unsafe. And so a lot of times, I mean, we're just like talking about a hypothetical situation, but I would say someone that gets angry when they've tried to set a boundary and someone disrespected that is you're trying to put distance between yourself and that person. Again, this can look different too in lots of different situations, but I think setting boundaries is easier said than done. And it's something where I think part of setting boundaries is saying, what do I need to be in and out or out of a relationship with somebody? And then if my boundaries crossed, what do I need to do? And does that mean leave? Like that, I think what you're bringing up is great because it's kind of another step in setting a boundary is, okay, this is what we need. And if this isn't followed, like if you communicate that, which I don't think we always have to go up to the person that's harmed us and communicate a boundary, because it can say, okay, if this person's here and if they try to come up to me, maybe that is a boundary cross and I need to leave. Maybe I don't want to make a scene in doing this. And so it can look different to different people. That's why it's important to think through it versus just, I mean, and I think that that's kind of what we're talking about too, is there's terms that can get thrown out, but it holds a lot and everybody understands it a little bit different because we have the strainer of, I think, a lot of social media, and I think that the beautiful thing, there's lots of different therapists that walk with people too.
Well, and I guess what I'm wondering too is I get when there are boundaries that are crossed that go beyond just maybe discomfort, or there's dangerous situations and things like that. I understand, but I guess when it becomes just about self-protection, emotionally or comfort, because it's like this person makes me uncomfortable, so I'm going to disengage with them, and then that really becomes more about management of your emotions, I guess, or emotional management. How does a person grow past that though? Because at a certain point, if we don't learn to interact with the people that we don't understand or that make us uncomfortable, like we're not really going to grow as a person. We're going to kind of stop. We're going to be stunted. We're not going to have responsibility for our actions. We're not going to practice repentance. We're not going to practice reconciliation. We're just going to go, this situation makes me emotionally uncomfortable, so now I am going to avoid it. Therefore, I've set a boundary and you have to respect that. And so I just wonder, as human beings, like that limits our potential for growth so much. If I don't head face on into situations that make me uncomfortable, I'm going to lose that relationship. I'm going to lose that connection, that community. I mean, there's so many things that it like, because it goes two ways when it's two people involved, I feel like it's really difficult to just go, okay, that's the boundary, it's done. I don't know. Maybe I'm misinterpreting that.
No, I think that's good.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that often can happen is you actually don't help that person grow. You know, if there's a pain or whatever caused by whatever I said, I did to somebody, and that person's like, I would just rather avoid the conflict and not have the conversation, and that's my boundary. Well, I'm just setting that person up to continue to hurt or fail other people, and the wake of their trauma is going to be there. And yes, there's some people that if you go address something with them, they're going to automatically, and probably most of us automatically will get defensive about it, you know, and then want to protect ourselves. And obviously how you approach that's different. But if we just kind of cut it off, we're like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to feel emotions around that person. They hurt me. I don't want to address that they hurt me. Then I think what you're doing sometimes, and I'm not saying this has to happen every time, but what you're doing sometimes is actually just creating more victims by not coming forward and having like those conversations. And yes, there are definitely times where somebody does go and make that case to somebody and they've gone to leadership, or, you know, there's a model in Matthew 18. Hey, if somebody's failed you, and this is talking about church, and sinned against you, then you're supposed to go to them and have that conversation. And if then you have that conversation with them and you haven't won them over with that conversation, then you need to go talk to somebody else and take another person with them as a witness. And so you have this conversation. And then, yeah, if it continues and you take it to the church, you know, more of the collective body, and they just don't own it, then it's like, all right, cut that person off at that point. But I think that biblical, especially among Christians, that biblical framework helps us, one, speak truth out loud, and also help protect other people in the midst of it, involve other people. Let that not just be whatever that pain is against you and another person, but invite other people into it to ultimately hopefully find healing. But if somebody just rejects healing and rejects all of that, then obviously it's like, and at that point, yeah, cut that relationship off. Treat them like you would a pagan and all that kind of stuff. But so I think that's a healthy biblical, especially in the Christian world, but not that we're always living in that world.
But to your point, Eric, with boundaries, I think it's a misused therapeutic term that people can use in their lives to avoid conversations and avoid people and avoid things that make them feel uncomfortable. And that does limit growth, and it also takes away from maybe if you actually need to set some good boundaries in your life, or boundaries that need to happen.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's just sometimes when people use these terms, I think we just have to be conscious of what we're saying, and because we're not licensed therapists. You are, but not everyone in the, you know what I mean? I just,
yes.
I think when we're looking at scripture, Alex, my question to you would be, maybe are there examples of where you could see Jesus setting boundaries, or is that something that we'd be grasping at straws to say one-to-one, like when he said no, or when he withdrew from crowds, or those types of situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jesus definitely had boundaries. I mean, even when I think of the woman who touched him and she wanted to be healed, Jesus was like, let's stop. Let's have a conversation about this. So I felt power go out from under me. He's not like, I'm taking it back, but he has that conversation, and he wants to publicly reveal what's happening, which for her could really put on extra shame, extra guilt. She's trying to avoid people because of her sickness, and Jesus does that. And often, like you were mentioning, Eric, like Jesus would withdraw. Like I think Jesus was so much more aware of not his flaws, but of his tank emotionally, physically, so much more hyper aware of that than we oftentimes are, especially in a produce kind of world and culture, that Jesus would often take time away from the crowds and say, hey, you guys go on ahead, get on the boat. I need to go be with my Father. And he was so much more, had a lot more emotional EQ than oftentimes I do. And there was times that Jesus was telling parables, and he's like, there's just going to be boundaries between who hears these things and who doesn't hear these things. And those who this will land on in a good way are going to hear the truth of this. And those who don't, they're not going to hear the good truth of this. And he talks about judgment that's coming, and I think all of those are ways of, in one way or another, setting boundaries in his life.
Or maybe even the way certain times people would expect him to heal someone and he didn't, or at least not in their time frame, things like that.
I even think about, there's so many things between the lines on this too, Alex, because I was thinking about like Jesus had a boundary of 12 that were like in his circle. And it would be interesting to like, we can maybe gather some from the Bible, but just like there was that. Or even one thing that I like to talk about in sessions with people is, you know, there was a storm raging on and the disciples were wanting this. I mean, they were scared and they wanted the storm to be silenced and stopped. And Jesus took a nap and he took space. And so to me, even in difficult times, even in times where it's like the push comes to shove, it's not maybe not the right time and there needs to be a boundary set. And I think Jesus shows us that boldly and we can do it in love.
Yeah. All right, let's shift into talking a little bit about when this vocabulary does get weaponized or at least abused and misused. I mean, there are terms like gaslighting, narcissist, toxic, several other ones that we've already thrown out that do feel like we hear them a lot and we start to wonder, does that mean what you think it means? Gaslighting's one that I hear all the time. Jess, help us understand what's a good definition for gaslighting.
One that I put in here was gaslighting is a form of persistent psychological manipulation and emotional abuse where the perpetrator causes the victim to doubt their own memory, perception, reality, and sanity. And so when we're saying that to somebody, if we're using like the actual term, like, do you actually mean that? Or is it right? Like, or are you, is somebody that just says gaslighting, like, is that the actual, are you like just trying to say somebody's
arguing with you?
Yes, like somebody's trying to like hype me up and get me to like say something, or I mean, I think it's being overused, but it's a very damaging, detrimental, abusive thing that happens.
Which I think you see it in like even in more intimate relationships, like couples and things like that, where they're in an argument and they're distorting facts, or you know, and say, no, you did this, or you always do this, or you you know, and it's that type of language that would be considered gaslighting. It's not necessarily just an argument or disagreement between people.
Yeah, I'm curious, like that's a good example. Like what are ways that somebody, maybe they don't realize they're being gaslit or whatever. What are ways that somebody can say, oh yeah, that's what that is? Or how would you help somebody, Jess, that's not able to see that and call that out in like a relationship that they're experiencing it? Like practical examples.
I mean, I think like a baseline is when you are walking away from a conversation and you are consistently feeling like you are, I mean, people will in these situations will feel crazy. Like they feel like their own sanity. Like, do I have a diagnosis? Like, do I have something wrong with me? If you're consistently feeling like that, I would be thinking that that's a way to potentially be being gaslit. And then another thing, like even just identifying like what's the truth and what's the lie in the conversation that I just had, and even processing it and not just taking it as facts. But it's definitely something that I think can happen consistently. And we're talking like it can happen in relationships. It can also happen in the workplace. It can happen with a leader. And I think another term that's thrown around too here is like the term narcissist, where definitely there's people that are in leadership, in relationships that are narcissists, that are repeating patterns, yes, and just they're excessively grandiose, and they're all about themselves, and they lack empathy, and all these things. But a lot of times, like we have a conversation that we don't like, or we're in an argument maybe with our boss or a friend or something, or like a group of friends, and it's like, oh, he's a narcissist or she's a narcissist. And so it can really get thrown around. And one thing is like, that's okay. Cause I think to some degree, if you're feeling like, if you're using the term gaslit, if you're using the term narcissist, I think even the word toxic, these are terms where we do not feel safe. We feel uncomfortable. Like there is something wrong, but is that the right term for it?
Yeah. And I know you had a conversation. I was trying to look it up on episode 269 with Chris Reese, who talked a lot about her experience, you know, before becoming a therapist, of being gaslit, actually being married to a narcissist and having family members that are narcissists. And I listened to that conversation, and it was fascinating because I think that term narcissist, it probably is one of the things that I hear more often than anything else, that really comes from the psychological world where people are diagnosing one another, I mean, somebody that has a little bit of pride in their life, or which all of us, I mean, at some point, probably all of us have a little bit of an ego problem or a little bit of self-preservation, and all of that's a part of, I think, the sin and the fall, but that doesn't mean we're a narcissist, and so that's definitely one of those terms that I'm like, I hear often that I'm like, pastorally, I'm like, let's slow down a little bit and let's leave that to the professionals to diagnose someone.
Because when it's not a professional diagnosis, it's extreme language in a lot of ways. And I think that, it's like calling someone a racist. Like,
yes, and you
okay,
can't
maybe they
challenge
have prejudice. Does that necessarily mean they're a racist? Because it's just like that word has extreme consequences tied to it. And I just think sometimes when you just throw those words around, it's like you're interpreting. You have interpretive powers over another person, right? Where you're almost trying to power up on them by maybe you feel like your vocabulary is better or whatever, and they might not even know how to respond to that because they don't necessarily know what it means.
Yes. I also will say, as a therapist, diagnosing a narcissist is difficult because there's a wide bucket of things that go into the diagnosis. Like I said a couple things, but there's just a lot of things where they are very manipulative, and it's kind of it feels like a moving target. And so a lot of times when there is a lot of different symptoms that go into a diagnosis, it's a big bucket where we can say something to somebody and maybe a couple of things do fit, but would you actually get that diagnosis? I mean, that is definitely not something that we take lightly.
Likely, I'm guessing you're in a conversation with a spouse or a family member, and based on what they're saying and describing about a person, maybe how they're gaslighting them, how they're doing these things, you're saying this person's probably a narcissist. I'm guessing most narcissists aren't spending a lot of time in therapy and actually getting a self-diagnosis. I could be wrong, but are there at the core, a narcissist doesn't think they have any problems.
They're often not in therapy, or they're in therapy for another reason.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be court ordered. Sometimes it can be marriage. It can be a family session. But if you research narcissism, it does not have there's not an end cure for that. There's once you diagnose a narcissist, it's always a narcissist. And so those people are often not in sessions, or they're not showing up regularly, or if they are, it's for different reasons. They're really interesting people, that actually truly have the diagnosis. They're very interesting people to talk with, but I definitely think that just my personal opinion, it's definitely overused. And sometimes as a therapist, I think that's a narcissist. You have, maybe there's some symptoms there, but you have no idea the detriment that somebody that's truly a narcissist does consistently without empathy.
Yeah. Well, and I guess maybe that's to the broader point of just over platforming therapy speak in general, because you start to replace curiosity with labels. And I think that just only hurts relationship building or relational building. I'm not curious about why you're saying the things you're saying. I'm not curious about why you act this way or treat others that way. And not because it's not always extreme, but I think a lot of times when people feel that discomfort, they just take it to that extreme diagnosis, and they're just diagnosing people without having. It's almost like what I'm trying to say is maybe we should leave the terms to professionals who know what they mean and know how to apply them in that setting. But when you're interacting with people in your day-to-day life, it doesn't do you any good to just apply a label to that person and just completely throw out the conversation, the self-examination of why you're feeling that way, because then that also just leads to, I know I'm right. So because I feel discomfort in this moment, they're this or that. And I can just walk away now and not have to examine my own heart for why I'm feeling this.
Yeah, I'm curious, Jess, because I think one of the differences in mental health, the mental health practice and therapy, is I think a lot of people will go and I've been a counselor, and one of the things that happens is you start to get enlightened to maybe these terms or the actual pain behind something, maybe trauma, all that kind of stuff. And so as you're uncovering stuff about your own life, you almost start to assume or think that you've become more professional or schooled in it because now I have language, I have words for it. And now I can start to like unprofessionally, but because I've sat under a professional, I can start to diagnose people. I mean, you wouldn't, someone with, liver cancer isn't walking around just, well, you having problem peeing today, or you got yellow pee 3 days in a row, probably liver cancer. And so, and these other ways, we probably wouldn't go to a medical doctor and just start thinking, all of a sudden I have training. But I think one of the tough things about this especially is there's a lot more, couch psychologists than there are like couch cardiologists or whatever, where we can learn this on TikTok and we can learn the language and we can self-diagnose, and then all of a sudden this becomes everywhere. This language becomes more normative. It becomes all of these types of things. And so how do you guard against that? Like, as you're having conversations with clients and you're wanting them to be more informed, because the more trauma informed they are, the more informed about this, the more they're able to help themselves. But how do you keep them from saying, all right, and now it's not your job to take this language and start overlaying it on everybody else, if that makes sense?
I mean, frankly, you can't. I mean, someone could take something great that I said in session and go put it out online like they said it. I mean, and I think that's the problem that we see here, and why we're even having this conversation is because that's part of what happens. But I think anybody that talks to somebody that's actually gone through the work of doing the healing knows that is simplifying.
Yeah.
And they know the deep heart work that it takes to sit in years of trauma or things that you've gone through and look it in the face and do the hard work. And so I think even seeing the distinction of those people, because they walk with, I mean, you can tell, like, especially like, I think even just me having discernment, it's like, you can look and see, like, you've walked a road and you've done the work and you've just read the book and
watch the
you're
TikTok.
trying to remember the quote that you memorized.
Yeah.
Like, there's a big difference. But there's nothing I can do.
Well, and I wonder if it has something to do with what you said early on in this episode about how, I guess, cutting edge and modern psychology is. And when because it's something in the mind, it's much more ambiguous. It's much more intangible. And so people are able, almost like in the spiritual world, to go, oh, that's a demon, or, oh, that's this or that, a spiritual oppression or whatever. People are able to kind of apply based on their own feelings, intuition, instinct, whereas medical science, when it's medicine or surgery, it's much more, I mean, I guess we're kind of separating therapy from like a psychologist, where they can prescribe medication and things like that for brain chemistry. But I'm just saying, when you're talking about therapy, though, it is more intangible, and so I think that makes people maybe feel a little more empowered to freely speak about it, because they think they have a grasp on it, or at least they're safe enough. They know enough to play a therapist on TV.
And there's a lot of good things that you can Google and find and do on your own, but it's definitely different than a therapist that's like schooled in a train of thought that's done hours and hours and hours of sitting with people and research and knows the appropriate next steps to take and can take their training and apply it safely to your life, and not just say, okay, this is step 1, step 2, step 3. It's not always that prescriptive. Sometimes it is. Like if you're doing like solution focus, it's like, okay, we're going to set 3 goals and in 4 sessions you're going to be done, but it's not always like that. And so in the hands of somebody else, and I think that the problem is too, like you're pointing, I mean, it does work for some people. Like some people can read a book or do something on TikTok and it works. And I think that that's why we have this issue, but that's also why we need to be cautious and like I'm not just because I can use a lot of words and memorize some things like a therapist. Like you're sitting with people in their trauma and you're bearing witness. And I think that that's the stuff that we miss when we're just scrolling on TikTok.
Well,
really
I think,
beating
you know,
TikTok
for me,
down,
and maybe this is a soapbox, but I get frustration sometimes when like someone's like, I just got ordained online, right? And I'm going to do somebody's wedding. And I'm like, man, I have friends that have done it, and, you know, I get that it's a good honor, and I've got my own thoughts on, you know, how marriages and all that should happen legally versus in the church and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes it's frustrating for me to hear like somebody's like, yeah, I just got ordained online and they wanted me to do the wedding and all that kind of stuff. Because to me, because you've been to a wedding doesn't mean you're qualified to do a wedding, because there's so much more when I'm doing a wedding than just performing a ceremony, you know, to prepare somebody and to walk somebody through it and to talk about covenant language and all of that kind of stuff. That's just different. And yeah, if somebody doesn't want to get married in the church, great. You don't have to. There's legal options to go explore that, but it sometimes is frustrating when someone's like, but yeah, I'm cool. I'll step in because my friend wants to not do it in church and they just want me to do it. And that's a cool honor and all that. Sometimes it's like a frustrating thing. And I'm sure for you, Jess, when people, you're like, I've done all this work. I really want to help people. I want people to understand all of it behind it. But then people just kind of scratch the surface or don't do the actual work and they get their TikTok therapy and things like that. Maybe it's a frustrating thing. I don't know. But for me, in my own world, that becomes a frustration.
I think it's more frustrating because now it's kind of creating something like when you're actually meeting with somebody, when somebody does decide to come to therapy, you kind of have to wade through what they think they already know versus what you can bring.
Like their self-diagnosis.
Yeah. And I think that thankfully I always take where anybody, every person I meet with, I say safe place, no judgment. And so I really, really try to hold fast to that. And so whatever they come with, I want to be curious and I want to notice. And that's like some of the things that they've used to try to help themselves up into that point. But I do have to strain some of those things out. And usually it's like, well, what's worked for you and what hasn't worked and why are you here now? Because I think it's like kind of can put a Band-Aid on things for a while, but then it doesn't really replace the real thing.
Werner Herzog, who is famously not a therapist, he's a German filmmaker. I think he's like 80 some years old, but he's kind of known for saying that he believes that illuminating every corner of the mind destroys the human spirit. That if you expose all of a person's hidden dark and shadowy aspects, that they become broken and uninhibitable. And so he's fervently against therapy. But he argues that a lot of times that healing that people need comes from community, from their close friends and family who have gone through similar experiences. And I mean, I hear that, and there's parts of it that I'm like, okay, I understand maybe where he's coming from, because I do think sometimes even in my own life, the more I start to understand about maybe the things that are wrong with me, I can want on some part work towards fixing them, but on another part, the things that maybe don't feel as fixable, you start to kind of just dwell on, and it almost makes it worse. It's like the more more self-discovery you go on, it also feels like it can start to backfire a little bit. So I think when the church world becomes so therapy informed, and that we use like therapy informed spirituality, this is just my personal concern. I just wonder, like, where do we forego those human experiences in place of therapy, where we have a loneliness epidemic, and I also and it's almost like running parallel with the rise of therapy. Are people just at a point now where they're hiring a friend because they don't have friendships? Not that that's bad, but is it because we are not building places for community to happen naturally, and really helping people heal in a more organic way. Instead, we've leaned into this, no, we're going to pay someone to be my friend and talk through this stuff, where that probably happened more just in the town square, in the common places that people gathered, or in, community groups, or in the churches. And so it's just one of those things where I've thought a lot about that, how, people are constantly talking about being lonely, and now they're kind of outsourcing their friendships to therapists.
I think that, some people could be doing that.
Yeah.
Some people
Not
could
that
need
I'm
that.
saying that therapy's wrong because of it, but I just
I
wonder.
I feel zero threats by anything you say. You're good, Eric. I think that specifically with this, a good therapist says, you need a friend. You're lonely. Let's get you there. And so with those people that I personally identify in my office, that's one of my goals for them, is how can we get them into community? How can we find them a friend? What are their, you're helping them, you're identifying that. A therapist will identify that and help them move towards that. But I do think that there are spaces where, there's people that are lonely. That is an epidemic. And there's research coming out on, there's a loneliness epidemic where people are surrounded by people but feeling lonely and unknown. And so I think some people are going to therapy, and I think that there's safety in it, because we can't tell anybody what we heard today. It's one of the only fields where I go home and, Ben, I've been doing this for about 10 years now. So Ben knows, but I can't talk about my day. I can't say oh, this is what happened, or the kids are like, what happened today? And I can't say, listen to what I heard. And so there is a space where it's there is safety in talking to somebody that cannot repeat.
But one of the things too that, and again, correct me because I'm being an armchair expert here.
I love it.
But you also, as a therapist, can't tell people what to do. And so I think probably selfishly, a lot of times people are coming, just tell me how to fix my life. Give me the 12 steps. Give me the whatever it is. And in a personal relationship with a friend, you're not going to always give the best advice to someone. But still, I think when that doesn't exist at all, where you can't go to someone and be like, I'm struggling with this, I'm not sure what to do.
Yeah.
And a therapist can't really, they can help you explore yourself and hopefully enlighten you to find the path. But they can't, I think a lot of times people do just want to be told, or at least given an option of what to do. You know?
I agree. There are many people that say, what would you do with this? Or what do you think about this? And it's not that you maybe can't give your opinion, but you create this reliance on yourself that's not healthy.
Yeah.
And it does not empower your client to figure things out for themselves or realize you can do this. You don't need to find another person to tell you what to do. And so that can be very confusing.
One of my favorite things about the podcast is that Eric and I have, for the last few years, duped Jess into free therapy, So, and everyone can hear it.
It's
she can't tell about most of our clients, but we are just online and Aaron all online for all the therapy she needs to give us, and so it's good. I appreciate it. I think ultimately, one of the cogs of people needing counseling and therapy is figuring out our emotions. How do we deal with our emotions when we have good emotions, bad emotions? How do we not suppress them, and all of those kinds of things? And so just help us figure out, maybe as we're coming to an end, Jess,
how has this turned into all of,
because you're the
expert. You're the actual expert here.
I'm I care what you guys
how
think
to look
too.
out for emotional suppression, what that might look like in somebody's life, or just the difference between that and just emotional absolutism, where we just are feelings don't matter. Who cares? That I don't have any feelings. Nobody can hurt me. Sticks and stones break my bones. Words will never hurt me. That feels like...
Well, because obviously being created in God's image, we are meant to have emotions.
Yes.
But I do think sometimes in the Christian world, like we talked last week, it's like spirituality can sometimes say that we can say almost hint towards that's better than emotions or leaning into your emotions, but both are good.
And people tend to fall into two different categories usually when I meet them, or maybe you guys even may tend to fall into one category or the other where there's emotional suppression. So those people can tend to ignore or minimize their feelings. And sometimes that looks like telling yourself it's not a big deal, or maybe nobody cares about me. Maybe you avoid talking about your feelings. Like if someone's like, how are you, Alex? Oh, I'm good. How are you? What'd you do this week? And you just like flip it back around. I'm not calling you out. But
I'm more of the other one. So
yeah, you're more, you're just like, oh, I'm glad you finally asked.
Everything.
Let me tell you. But that can look like what we talked about earlier, picking up your phone, doing that. Or there's this emotional absolutism where you tend to treat your feelings like the final authority. So it tends to be like your feelings are facts. So like, Eric, you made me mad, and in that I think that you're a narcissist. You're a narcissist because you make me feel so mad that only a narcissist would do that. And so bam, there you are. And so I've got this figured out. That can also look like negative self-talk, where it's like, I feel worthless. I feel fat and ugly and bloated today. And so I am fat and ugly, and maybe I'm just bloated. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's those terms where it's like we feel something, and so it is something, and they kind of go unchecked. And that can cause a problem.
Yeah, that's good. Is there, and I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I think that this conversation hopefully points people towards solutions, not just a solution. You know what I mean? Like, I think we heal through a lot of different ways, whether that's through community, friendship, faith, but also therapy can be something that is part of that ecosystem that we're participating in, and not just saying it is the end all solution. But I think it gets thrown around sometimes where, that person needs to go to therapy. And it's like, that's going to fix everything. And it's like, no, it's just probably one piece of the puzzle to taking care of yourself holistically, not in a new age holisticness, but like, taking care of everything.
If I can share one piece of scripture is that okay?
Yeah, you can.
That's kind of Alex's thing.
Look at Alex, I was just kidding. But a piece of scripture that I just like to read with clients, it's in Isaiah 43, and it says, "For now this is what the Lord says, He created you, Jacob, that you be He who formed you, Israel. Do not fear, I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name, you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I'll be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, and the flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior." And I read that because we are not promised that once we go through, we're not going to go through something and have safety. It's the fact that like we're going to go through something and Jesus is going to be with us. He doesn't say like, okay, it's not like if you look at this TikTok and you get all your answers, you're going to be okay. Or if you avoid your issues and your emotions, that you're going to have safety. And that's what being a Christian is. I mean, we are going to walk through fire and water and rivers, and that looks different to each of us. But we have the promise that Jesus walks through it with us. And we have the promise that He is not going to leave us or forsake us. And I really take that and say, this is something where it's like we can experience very difficult things. Some of the things we've talked about, like maybe we need to set boundaries or do things, but Jesus is with us in those moments.
Yeah.
And I think it's something where we often think like, if I'm okay, I'm not feeling any of those things and I'm not in any of those trials. And really it's like, we are going to experience those things. And He's saying like, when you go through this, I will be with you. I will walk with you. And so I think we can claim that promise and take that promise that we see in Scripture and apply that here.
That's great. All right. Well, we'll stop,
Stop it.
Grilling you, Jess. No, thank you for all your insights on that. Thanks to everybody who's listened. Hopefully this has been helpful, beneficial. But if you do need some free therapy, you can always reach out to us on Instagram or TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast. Send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org.
That would be fun.
Or leave us a voicemail.
Also, your problems
On a
with
voicemail.
Yeah, just call us up. Live
Don't
diagnosis.
say your name.
Yeah. At 402-885-9930. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.